Now, as promised, the news in detail. We begin in the United States, where U.S. President Donald Trump has said Iran is playing with fire by exceeding the uranium enrichment limit defined by the 2015 nuclear deal. Tehran, though, denies allegations that it is engaged in a long-term violation of the 2015 nuclear deal it signed with world powers. The White House says it will continue to apply maximum pressure until Tehran alters its course of action. British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt says that if Iran breaks the nuclear deal, then Britain is out. Germany has also expressed its apprehension over Iran breaking the deal, saying it is very concerned at these developments. It called on Iran not to further undermine the nuclear agreement. This came after reports surfaced claiming Iran has amassed more low-enriched uranium than permitted under the 2015 deal agreement. Well, defending itself, Iran says it has not violated the nuclear deal and will return to the enriched uranium stockpile limit if European signatories meet their obligations. This comes after the UN nuclear watchdog said Iran's stock of low-enriched uranium was above the allowed limit of 202 kilos. The United Nations is urging Tehran to abide by the deal and settle issues through the JCPOA mechanism. Earlier, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said Washington must treat Tehran with respect if it wants to negotiate. Well, in other news, 9 people have been wounded in the latest Houthi rebel attack on Saudi Arabia's Abha airport. The injured include 8 Saudis and an Indian national. The Yemeni rebels say they've launched drones in a wide-ranging attack on warplanes at the international airport. Earlier, the Saudi-led coalition intercepted a drone launched by the Houthis toward the kingdom's western border. The Taliban have agreed to talk to representatives of the Kabul government. The group's spokesperson, Sohail Shaheen, says negotiations will be held, though, after U.S. forces withdraw. Shaheen says Kabul's negotiators will not be acknowledged as part of a government, but as individuals. This comes as the U.S. and Taliban representatives recently met in Doha for the 7th round of talks on the Afghanistan peace process. U.S. President Donald Trump has said he wants to pull troops out of Afghanistan, but fears it could lead to terrorist attacks on American soil. Trump says it's preferable to fight militants in Afghanistan than at home. In an interview, Trump said even if the U.S. did remove its forces, it would leave a very strong intelligence presence. Trump said the problem with pulling 9,000 U.S. troops from Afghanistan is that the country is a breeding ground for terrorists. His statement comes as Washington attempts to hammer out a peace deal with the Taliban in Doha. In Kabul, the death toll from a car bomb targeting the city's diplomatic area has now risen to 16. On to Sudan, where the main opposition coalition has announced it will step up protests in July to pressure the ruling military to cede power to civilians. Meanwhile, 3 more bodies with bullet wounds have been found in the city of Omdurman, raising the death toll to 11. Hundreds of people gathered in Omdurman across the River Nile a day after bloodshed in anti-military protests in Khartoum. Protest leaders and the ruling military have traded blame for the renewed violence. Tens of thousands of protesters marched towards the presidential palace to demand a civilian government. It was the first mass protest since the deadly crackdown on protesters left dozens dead last month. Protesters and generals have locked horns over the installation of a civilian rule following the ouster of longtime ruler Omar al-Bashir in April. OPEC, meanwhile, has agreed to extend oil supply cuts until March 2020. Members overcame their differences to prop up the price of crude amid a weakening global economy and soaring U.S. production. The extension was agreed upon in the Ministerial Monitoring Committee meeting late on Monday. Crude has climbed more than 25% so far this year after U.S. tightened sanctions on OPEC members Venezuela and Iran, slashing their oil exports.
Very happy to announce that we have reached an agreement to extend for 9 months the current production level.
On to Europe now. The EU's 28 national leaders are spending a third consecutive day discussing who will get the bloc's top jobs. Italy and East European states have blocked socialist Dutchman Frans Timmermans from leading the EU's Executive Commission. Leaders are trying to balance political affiliations, varying regional interests, and gender parity in the senior tiers. EU leaders must have the deal ready on Tuesday or risk being overtaken by the new European Parliament. The Parliament picks its new president on Wednesday and could act independently if member states are unable to agree. The new EU Assembly must then back any candidate to head the Commission nominated by national leaders. The inability of EU leaders to find consensus candidates reflects the bloc's fragmentation. In Hong Kong, meanwhile, police have cleared the Legislative Council building of protesters. Demonstrators smashed their way into the building and daubed the walls with graffiti. Thousands of protesters faced off with riot police on the anniversary of Hong Kong's return to Chinese rule in 1997. Demonstrators carried road signs, corrugated iron sheets, and pieces of scaffolding inside the building. The government called for an immediate end to the violence, while the territory is bracing for even more protests over an extradition bill. The death toll from heavy floods in Russia's Siberian Irkutsk region has risen to 14. Emergency services say 13 more are still missing, while 153 have been taken to hospital. A state of emergency has been declared in the flood-affected areas of Siberia. As many as 83 settlements in 6 districts have been inundated. More than 6,000 residential houses accommodating 32,000 people have been flooded. Russian President Vladimir Putin has called for emergency services to step up their operations on his visit to the affected areas of the city of Bratsk. Well, in Moscow itself, a court has sentenced Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny to 10 days in prison. The politician has been sentenced for taking part in last month's protests in support of a journalist. Prosecutors accuse Navalny of violating Russia's strict protest laws during the June 12th rally. The Kremlin critic was among 500 protesters detained by police during the march in Moscow. Demonstrators demanded the punishment of police officers allegedly involved in framing the journalist. On to Germany, where an armed forces helicopter has crashed in Hanover, killing a pilot and injuring another. The incident comes a week after a pilot was killed when 2 Eurofighter jets collided over northeastern Germany. Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen says the military will investigate the cause of the crash. Germany's armed forces have outdated equipment, which has prompted calls for a complete overhaul of the military's hardware. The United Nations has warned Italy against criminalizing sea rescue operations after it arrested the captain of a German rescue ship. The Sea Watch landed 42 migrants ashore. The UN has criticized Italy for its hostility towards refugee rescue ships. Tensions between Berlin and Rome have also risen over the detention of the Sea Watch captain. The 31-year-old Carola Racket was questioned by prosecutors at a courthouse in Agrigento. Prosecutors say they will decide later whether to let Racket go or detain her in Sicily. She's accused of aiding human smuggling and resisting a warship order that carries a penalty of 10 years in jail. The Lebanese government says it is restoring security after an assassination attempt on a government minister in which 2 of his aides were killed. The convoy of the State Minister for Refugee Affairs, Saleh al-Gharib, was attacked in the Aliyah region. Lebanon's Supreme Defense Council says everyone wanted in connection with the attack will be arrested and referred to the judiciary. It says the decision is aimed to bury strife and to safeguard the state. North and South Waziristan are the largest districts in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's tribal belt of Pakistan. The region was a victim of FCR Talibanization after the war on terror and displacement due to a crackdown on miscreants. But now all energies are being diverted to uplift the area. More now in this detailed report by our correspondent Sumaira Khan from Waziristan.
Pakistan's tribal belt was peaceful post-independence, but after 9/11, the region was infested with militants from the Afghan side of the border. To flush out extremists, Pakistan moved in troops. Later, development projects were undertaken to establish peace in the region. A big challenge was to save local youth from falling into the trap of extremists and militants.
इस वक्त हमारे 272 बच्चे
272 students have passed out in 6 entries as of now, out of which 59 are either pursuing engineering or have completed their degree. I am proud of these kids as they were short of opportunities earlier, but now they are eagerly completing their education. I am glad to tell you that Cadet College Vana is situated in one of the most hardcore tribal areas, but we are putting in our best efforts. That is why Vanians are second to none, they are the best.
are second to none.
Students are now enthusiastically pursuing their education, eyeing a bright future ahead.
We are here, but every child from this area wishes to come here to attain quality education, as this is the biggest institute here in Vana.
In this conflict-ridden region, the local Mahsood, Wazir and Dawar tribes are assisting authorities in rebuilding efforts. Health and employment are highest priorities as facilities are being built, keeping women's unique requirements in mind.
It was very difficult to get medical assistance for women in Miransha. Sometimes this resulted in avoidable deaths. We used to visit a lady doctor, which was the only facility available to us. But now this hospital meets all medical needs.
If hitches are handled with clear-sightedness, they could project a great future of Pakistan's tribal agencies. The land is rich in natural resources, but dissident forces need to be subjugated for the progress of this tough terrain. South Waziristan district is the only district as of now in the entire tribal belt of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Pakistan, which has received an enormous portion in the development budget allocated for the tribal belt, and that is why people are very satisfied with mega projects like Agricultural Park Vana, Cadet College Vana, Shulam Hospital and Gomalzam Dam, which needs no introduction. But the only demand right now is immediate restoration of cellular data network in the agency. Sumaira Khan, Indus News, South Waziristan, Pakistan.
Time now for a break. Don't go anywhere though, plenty more news still to come. Let's begin this segment of the bulletin in the Philippines, where millions of residents in the capital, Manila, are experiencing water shortages for up to 20 hours a day after the level of that city's Angat Dam fell drastically.
The dam provides 97% of the city's water. Hydrologists say it will take 2 or 3 rainstorms to replenish the reservoir and restore supply. The capital's 13 million people. Tribesmen living near the dam have witnessed the rapid drop in water levels.
After about 10 years, it is only now that I have noticed that the water level has gone down this low.
Fishermen now pick their catch from the shallow, muddy slosh of the depleted reservoir which feeds the Philippine capital, the state where the Bureau said the weekend downpours were not enough to fill the reservoir. The water dropped to the critical levels last week at the Angat Dam in Bulletin, north of the capital.
We used to dive here to fish, but we can no longer do it because the water is just too low and muddy. Now we can only use our hands to catch the fish.
Lawmakers have launched an inquiry into the shortages. However, the authorities have admitted failing to build necessary infrastructure to meet the growing demand for water.
Now, researchers warn that insects are dying off at an alarming rate, hitting food chains and habitats. A group of German entomology enthusiasts have presented disturbing evidence of that phenomenon.
The Amateur Entomology Society of Krefeld houses as many as 80 million insects floating in ethanol bottles. Each bottle contains a set of insects caught over a certain period. The society's research has found the total biomass of flying insects in the area has reduced by 76%.
It is anthropogenic causes that provoke the decline of insects. There is no doubt about it. But we don't know where it comes from and in which direction it goes. And when we analyze such small volumes of the biomass, we can't draw any real prognosis about what will happen in the coming years or decades.
While climate change and plastic pollution get all the attention, another environmental disaster is also underway. Insects, which form the bottom shelf of nature's food chain, are dying out. One of the Amateur Entomology Society of Krefeld's jars from 1994 contains 1,400 grams of trapped insects. The newest one contains only 300 grams.
We conducted research in identical locations, one in 1994 and the other in 2016 at exactly the same place.
The shrinking insect population has already begun impacting birds across the Dutch border. Members of the Amateur Entomology Society of Krefeld say the proper research and record keeping are highly important to fight biodiversity loss.
It is extremely important for us to produce comparable data. We noticed as early as 1983 and 1984 how effective these traps were and how effective they were in delivering many very interesting samples of what was happening in one place.
The decline of insects can be attributed to pesticide use and industrial pollution. A United Nations report published this May warned that 1 million species around the globe are threatened with extinction.
The 4,000-year-old pyramid at Hun in Egypt is opening up to the public. An intricate network of passageways and ancient burial places will be on display.
The Hun Pyramid was discovered in the 19th century. Until recently, it was covered in rocks and debris. Now fallen stones have been restored to their original places and wooden staircases have made the ruins more accessible. The ancient monolith is the final resting place of King Senusret II.
Who is King Senusret II? He is the fourth king of the 12th dynasty in the Middle Kingdom. He ruled for a short period, about 12 years. He shared rule with his father for 7 years. His entire reign lasted about 19 years. This is considered a short period of time. He and his successor, Amenemhat III, built the pyramid here in Lahun.
A number of artifacts have also been put on display outside the pyramid. They include amulets, masks and chains. All are in pristine condition according to the Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities.
The white one is ivory, the black is black crystal, and we can see bronze or copper. Amulets, scarabs, shells, chains, catons, which is still in perfect condition of preservation. Most of those pieces, by the way, they are going straight ahead from here to our museums in Egypt.
Egypt's tourism sector is one of the country's main sources of foreign revenue, but it has struggled since the 2011 uprising that led to the ouster of then-President Hosni Mubarak.
Meanwhile, the French capital Paris has banned all diesel vehicles older than 13 years from the city center in its latest move to tackle air pollution. Petrol vehicles over 21 years old are already banned in the French capital.
Air quality has become a burning issue for governments across the EU after Green parties made gains in May's parliament elections. In 2018, a Greenpeace report listed Paris as the worst Western European capital for small particle air pollution. The deputy mayor for transport in Paris, Christophe Nedovsky, says automated checks are needed to curb pollution.
It is not normal that in France we are lagging behind other other European countries where automated checks have existed for years. And therefore, these physical control measures are indeed necessary, but they are not on the scale of the health issue of improving air quality.
According to health service officials, air pollution causes 48,000 deaths a year in France, making it the country's second biggest killer after smoking.
Stocks in Asia continue to rise after the U.S. and China agreed to resume trade talks. U.S. President Donald Trump said trade talks with China have already begun. Development boosted global jittery markets from the U.S.-China trade war. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has risen more than 1% despite protests in the territory. Japan's Nikkei 225 index closed marginally up. Chinese mainland and South Korean markets saw a minor decline. Oil prices were largely stable, with Brent crude futures trading at around $65 per barrel. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. Well, you're all caught up. Thanks very much for watching this bulletin here at Indus News.